welcome everyone to Wisdom 101, and my guest today is Diane Butera. So thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure.
So Diane Butera is the owner of Eugene Yoga, and Eugene Yoga was just honored as the best yoga studio in Eugene with the Register Guard local paper. Also this year we got the weekly, Eugene Weekly Best of, and I believe the U of O. So I wanted to talk to Diane about what she's done to help create this studio that has been honored and has been really growing and successful. And so we're going to ask some different questions today. And if you are a yoga teacher or yoga student, I think you'll find this conversation really helpful for you. So again, thanks so much for sharing your story today.
You're welcome.
So first, can we start with your personal story? You have a really interesting story that I know a little bit about, what brought you to yoga and kind of the trials and tribulations, and what yoga has done for you that made you want to open a studio and share it full time.
Okay, well, to start, I came to yoga in my early 40s. So I've been practicing yoga for about 18 years now. And I wandered into a yoga class kind of by accident almost. My step aerobics class was canceled. I was at the gym. I wanted a class. I peeked in. I thought, what the heck? I'll give it a try. And I wandered into this class, and it was actually taught by a senior citizen. She was probably in her late 70s. And she was pretty delightful, so I enjoyed listening to her and enjoying what I was doing. And then it seemed to be going pretty well. I thought, okay, this yoga's kind of nice. I feel it's pretty easy. And then suddenly she was doing some poses that I couldn't do. And I was a bit surprised. And I thought, oh, wait a second. Why can't I do that? And she can. And it got me a bit curious. So I ended up going to a few more yoga classes where, again, I was surprised that yoga was more challenging than I had expected. And, my mindset at that point was more of, what is yoga going to do for my body? I wasn't really even tuned into what yoga was going to do for my mind or the inner practice of yoga.
Right.
But I was curious enough that I saw that there were some challenges here, and I was a runner and a weightlifter. That's what my exercise was. And for me, yoga was another form of exercise. So I thought, okay, I'll try yoga. If it seems to fit in with my other routine, I'll keep doing it. I found a great yoga teacher. I'll never forget my first yoga teacher. I practiced with him, studied with him for 2 years. And he didn't give a lot of commentary. He led us quietly through a yoga practice. He was very patient with me, with my eyes roaming everywhere and my inability to lie still during Shavasana. And fast forward 10 years later, and I came out of yoga feeling like, look at me. I can do a handstand, I can do a headstand, I can do a back bend. And I still really hadn't quite grasped what yoga was about. I disliked Shavasana. It was my least favorite pose. I kept thinking, why are we doing Shavasana? I could be getting a lot done. But somewhere along the line, and it started with Sarahjoy Marsh, I started to understand that I was missing out on the real exquisiteness of yoga, and that was quieting the mind. And maybe I just wasn't ready until then, but suddenly Shavasana became a place where I could settle into it and welcome it and understand that it was very productive. I like that idea, that it's actually productive. And so I started practicing and studying with Sarahjoy Marsh, and she's such a way with words that create this imagery for you and take you to a place that you don't often get to go in a yoga class. And that started me on a different track. And then I came to a point in my life where I was at a crossroads. I was actually at a pretty low point, thinking, I don't know what to do with my life. My children had grown up. I'd been a stay-at-home mom. I really felt that I was floundering. And someone said to me, why don't you go be a yoga teacher? I said, yeah, I don't think so. I like taking yoga, not practicing it. I mean, not teaching it. Yeah. But people encouraged me to do it. And so I'll fast forward. I went through a teacher training. It was pretty intense. I came out very depleted, but I also came out wanting to teach yoga. So I started teaching yoga, and I liked it. I liked it because I saw that it was helping other people. And I'm a caretaker, I'm a nurturer, I'm a mother. I like helping people. And so that felt really good. But very shortly after becoming a yoga teacher, I received the diagnosis of ovarian cancer. So then I had to deal with that. And at that time, I had an interesting thing happen. One of the places where I was teaching said to me, why don't you finish your chemo and then come back to teaching? And so it was pretty eye-opening that someone would say you can't teach while you're going through chemo, because I'm a pretty healthy person, and so it really wasn't affecting me that much, and I wanted to keep teaching. And I think my husband saw that. He was really concerned because I had worked so hard to find a place to belong that he came up with this idea to buy a yoga studio. Even though I had always said I never ever want to own a business. I'm not a business person. That's not me. I don't want to be in business with my husband. Don't get me wrong, he's a great guy. I just thought that's a little bit too much togetherness. But this opportunity came up, and it seemed right. It just seemed right. And I think that's what you have to be open to, is what does your gut tell you? What does that inner wisdom tell you? And so we bought a yoga studio, and we said, hey, we'll give it 6 months. If we're still losing money, we'll let go of it. And right off the bat, we were profitable, and we did well. And I wasn't very involved because I was still going through treatment. But when I was done, then I had something to come back to. And that was a real journey as well, because I wasn't a businesswoman. I had to learn a lot about business. Thank goodness I have an extremely patient husband who he really mentored me in such a sweet way and helped me learn and grow as a businesswoman. And there were I did have some talents that I didn't know I had. I'm a pretty good marketer. I did well with the programming, but there were so many meaningful moments along the way. It's hard to capture all of them to convey to people what I actually went through. Because, I went through this whole journey of cancer, and I went through this whole process of becoming a yoga teacher and then a studio owner. And I have other hats I wear. I'm a mother. It's so important to me, a wife. And so as I made my way on this journey, I was continually seeking the right teacher. And so Sarahjoy Marsh was incredibly important to me. And then along came Scott Anderson. And between those two teachers, I have found my foundation and had more space to find out who I am and be the teacher I want to be. And the tricky thing about becoming a yoga teacher, because you asked me how I came to yoga, and then I evolved that into being a teacher and then a studio owner, but coming back to a yoga practitioner, I always tell people, you lose a little bit of your innocence when you become a yoga teacher, because you come to the mat and you're no longer just a student, you're also a teacher.
Right.
And it's only until recently that I can step onto the mat in my own home practice and let go of that teacher voice and say, what do you need today? What does your body need to do? And not be thinking, oh, I should teach that. Oh, I should tell my students this. Have you experienced that?
Yeah, that's really interesting. And it's kind of like I had a friend who was a musician, and he went through music school, and he said it ruined music for him because then he'd hear a song and all he could think about was the time signature and all the details. And like you said, you kind of lose the innocence or mystery of yoga. You do. But you do gain a lot. And I wouldn't go back, but I do miss that part. Yeah. I do miss that part. Well, it's interesting because, like you said, you came to yoga from a physical standpoint, being an athlete, looking for the physical benefits, being intrigued with the physical benefits that you saw in your teacher, and feeling that was something that you wanted. And it sounds like it evolved into somewhat of a spiritual path and even a business vocation as well. It's interesting. I think everybody has their roundabout way of coming to yoga for different reasons, and it seems like people are heading in the same direction. Do you find that people, as they advance in yoga, they kind of come into a similar vision and what they want from yoga, or do you think that everybody is finding something different out of yoga at the same time? That's a good question, and I can't really speak for what other people are actually experiencing. I can only reflect upon what I see happening, and I think that you have different factions. I think some people, they evolve in their yoga practice where they finally come full circle back to where yoga started, and that was it's an inner practice. I mean, that's really where yoga started. This stuff that we do, these poses, these asanas, these back bends, these balancing poses, that's not part of yoga. That's contemporary modern yoga that took a lot from gymnastics
And there's nothing wrong with that. There's actually some cool stuff about it, but I'm not so sure the fancy poses have a lot to do with yoga. So I do think there are some people that have come full circle back to the true purpose of yoga, which is to find that inner peace, that contentment, to let go of striving and grasping, and to have some moral precepts that we live by. I do think there are other people who get so dogmatic about how to practice yoga, and then they've put in a lot of money, time, years for a particular style that they feel very attached to that, and maybe they don't ever get back to that, what the true purpose of yoga was, and they're still into, hot, sweaty, power flow, and that's not sustainable. It's been proven over and over again it's not sustainable to keep practicing like that. The body changes, and there are certain things that we do as yoga practitioners, especially since a lot of us are hypermobile, that are actually not good for our bodies. So I think there is a definite group going one direction and another group going the other direction, and I don't mean to make any enemies saying that, and I think just by my tone you can tell I'm not real impressed with the people who decide to stay focused on the intense yoga, because I don't think it's sustainable, and I don't think it gives the right message to people. I think it very much buys into this whole thing that there's something wrong with this, and if we can only look better, be stronger, whatever it is, that then we'll attain enlightenment, or I don't know, we'll get into yoga heaven or whatever it is.
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't know if you see any parallels to religion, kind of how there's a teacher and then it kind of splits, and then those all split, and it seems like pretty soon you come up with hundreds of factions. And do you see yoga kind of growing in that way, that everybody's going in different directions, or do you think that ultimately there's something, what is it do you think that connects? What is yoga then, if you can have everything from an extreme contortionist posture to a yoga nidra or a restorative yoga? Do you think we can collect all those into the yoga category, or are I guess you've seen a lot of teachers, you've seen a lot of styles, and you've trained with a lot of different systems. Do you feel that there is too much? Is there a risk in all this expansion, or should we be kind of coming back into a more unified vision of yoga?
That's a good question. I don't think it's for me to decide, but my preference would be that we would share one common vision, that yoga could be practiced by anybody and could be practiced safely by anybody. That's what I'd like to see, and I don't think that's where all roads lead. I think there are plenty of systems and practices in yoga that do not have that as an objective.
What do you think is the most important thing, or the most important thing a teacher can offer to their students in terms of maybe cueing or philosophy or mindset to help make sure that there is that sustainability and that safety in the way that they teach?
So in terms of sustainability as a teacher, I think that most importantly, it's the tone you create in the room. And a teacher, that's probably the most important thing about a teacher, is how he or she creates space. And you have teachers who do that in all different ways. Some use humor, some use yoga philosophy, some use chanting or pranayama or poetry. Some, it's just simply their presence and the way they hold space. So I think it's really unique to each teacher, and I don't think everybody has it. I don't think everybody has that talent or skill. We're all capable of doing it to some extent, but there are definitely teachers who can do it better. And I think that having self-awareness of who you are and being really sure of who you are, so that you don't try to be like whoever trained you, or be like the person you saw in the video, or what you think a yoga teacher should be, that you have to have cultivated self-awareness. And that can happen when you're 22, and it can happen when you're 62. There's no saying. I've seen very young yoga teachers just have it and be able to teach very successfully, authentically, and hold space really well.
And so what advice would you have for especially young teachers who are trying to find their voice? Perhaps their teacher was very humorous and warm and fuzzy, but maybe they have a more strong and direct approach. Is it just self-awareness? Is there ways that people can find that?
I think there are various ways of a teacher finding their authentic voice. One way is self-awareness, to know who you are so that you aren't trying to copy or imitate, be another version of the teacher that you studied with. But in terms of the practicalities, I think there are some tools that yoga teachers can employ and some skills they can learn that would help them in this quest for finding their authentic voice and stepping into the role of the yoga educator. And notice I said the role of the yoga educator, because I think a yoga teacher should be so much more than just a teacher. And the yoga educator is what really sums it up for me. And I'm borrowing that from my teacher, Scott Anderson, because I've just found this to be a really important aspiration, to be a yoga educator.
Yeah.
So in terms of being a yoga educator, there's a number of things teachers can do. One is to have a mentor, so someone who's committed and interested in your progress. And I recommend that it's a paying relationship so that it's professional. They can video record themselves. I don't know too many teachers that actually record themselves and then watch the video. They can have goals, objectives for themselves that they set each month. So maybe this month you want to work on voice modulation, or next month you want to work on assisting, but you actually are raising the bar for yourself and setting goals for yourself. You can have a study group, a couple of other teachers that you work with that you're supporting each other, giving each other feedback, advice, support, so that you can progress in your teaching skills. I think that if you start to spread yourself too thin by going to a lot of different classes and taking lots of trainings, you can get lost in that myriad of options that there are. So it's important to hone in and not do too much, because you've got a life outside of being a yoga teacher as well. So have a plan, work your plan, be certain that that plan is the right one for you, and stay true to it. The best thing you can do is show up. So you show up every day. You show up professionally, you show up spiritually, you show up emotionally, in all aspects of your life. And that's probably the biggest concern I have with the yoga industry is so many people take it as a hobby, and they approach it as a hobby, and you approach a hobby much differently than you do a profession. And so I would say if you want to be a yoga educator and being a yoga teacher is important to you, take it seriously, be a professional. And there's a big difference between yoga teachers who are professionals and yoga teachers who are hobbyists. Even a hobbyist can be professional, but that doesn't typically happen.
Right. I think that's an important point, and it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. I think if people don't take their classes seriously, the classes won't grow, and they won't be able to progress into a full profession. And it seems like that is an important aspect. So what would you say to those teachers out there who are looking to kind of take it to the next level? You offered some really great options there. And so what would you say is like the number one thing that they can start right away to become more professional in their teaching?
I would say go to the studio owner, talk to them about their commitment, ask them what they need from them. It really means a lot to me if a teacher takes the time to show up and say, hey, I really want to be successful, and I want to help your studio be successful. It doesn't work so well if it's only about you. So it needs to be a relationship. I'm working really hard to make you successful. I'd like to know that you are also committed to helping the studio be successful. That's my livelihood. Right. So I think that working with a studio owner, for the people who are employing you, is really important. Having really honest dialogue about what the expectations are. As a yoga teacher, you need to show up. So the first year, don't take a vacation for more than maybe a weekend. Don't sub out your classes. Show up. Teachers who take lots of vacations in the beginning, they never get their classes off the ground. Right. Students like that habit, that consistency. In terms of what else I can do to be more professional, have a plan. Have a plan on what it looks like. What's your 1-year plan? What's your 2-year plan? What's your 3-year plan? What's your 4-year plan? Where are you going? So that you understand how to navigate there.
It's interesting to me because it seems like a lot of people come to yoga almost as an escape from the business mindset. You know what I mean? Like they might work a corporate job and they teach yoga as a way to kind of let go of their problems, let go of their identity, let go
Sure.
of time and space. And do you think that that's one of those intrinsic conflicts that seems to happen to yoga teachers, that the natural skill set or personality that makes a yoga teacher really good at the yoga skills is almost a hindrance in their ability to set goals, to be, to look at it as a business and to succeed professionally?
Mm-hmm. I would say there are very few teachers who succeed professionally that don't know how to teach yoga as a business. There's a few, very, very small handful, that they're just so good that they've got support in the background that they're able to be successful. But the teachers that I've seen that are the most successful are the ones that are most professional and take it pretty seriously. So that doesn't mean that when you show up on the mat that you have to be all businesslike. That's your opportunity to come and teach the yoga, teach what you love, your passion, the belief that you have in yoga as this healing modality. But after you leave the class, did you pay attention to the names of your students? Did you document how many students were in your class? Do you have a plan for where you're going to go next? What's going to happen? So I do think you do have to be a yoga professional. I think that's one of the problems in the yoga industry is so many people go into it as an escape. And yoga's not an escape. Yoga's not to make you more sensitive. Yoga's to make you more resilient, more grounded, more in this body, more on this earth. And people who are treating yoga as an escape, I think they're missing the whole purpose of yoga, that they're going to have more suffering because that's not the real world. And that's not embodiment. And that's the beauty of yoga, is the embodiment, to be here, to be now, to be present with what is and stop resisting what is. I don't like the whole idea of escape. That's what movies are for.
Touche, yes. I hear you. And for studio owners, there's something like 70,000 registered yoga teachers in the world, and I think there's close to 5,000 yoga schools in the world. So there's a lot of studio owners. Some of them are independent, kind of mom and pop, small business owners like yourself. Some are working in corporate situations as well. There might be some in gyms. But what was the biggest challenges that you had to face starting and running a studio, and what were the things that led to your success?
So you have two questions for me. What are the biggest challenges and what led to my success? The biggest challenges, I think, are finding excellent teachers. I don't want just a good teacher. I don't want a very good teacher. I want excellent teachers. And there just aren't that many really excellent teachers out there. But you have to be patient. And then those excellent teachers, they're teaching someplace else. So you have to hope that they'll want to come and teach for you. So that's the biggest challenge, is finding those excellent teachers.
And how would you know that you found an excellent teacher? What are the things you look for, or the things that they present?
Wow, that's a great question. How do I know when I found an excellent teacher? Well, I take their class for one thing. And there's just something when a teacher has that it factor. There's something where you just want to hear what they have to say, and that you feel that you walk away and you feel better in your body and you feel better in your spirit. So it's more experiential, and it's different for different teachers. For one teacher, it could be just how soft and sweet and genuine they are, and how they combine yoga philosophy with alignment cues. For another teacher, it depends on what the students are looking for. So for another teacher, it could be, this person has such a deep spiritual practice that makes that person really successful. So when I'm choosing these teachers, and when I'm asking them to come and teach, and I'm saying, you're an excellent teacher, I want you to come teach, they're not all cookie cutter version of each other. There's one teacher that has a certain skill set, another teacher who has a different background, and so that's really important to me, is to have that diversity, because not all students come for a spiritual practice, not all students come for alignment cues, not all students care about yoga philosophy, and so you want to have some diversity in your teaching staff. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah. And what were the challenges, say, in the first year, that the biggest challenges that you faced as a studio owner?
Honestly, it's a handful of teachers not behaving professionally. Teachers calling me up and say, oh, I want to go to the coast this weekend. I can't find a sub. Can you just cancel my class? Could you imagine calling up your bank job and saying, hey, I can't come in and work the window today. Can you just close that window? I won't be able to be there.
Yeah.
So teachers not behaving professionally. And it's not all of them. It's not even most of them. It's that handful that means I have to throw my clothes on at 8 o'clock Saturday morning, run out the door and teach their class. I think teachers not behaving professionally would probably be the most important, because you have to have some consistency. If you say a class is on the schedule, you can't just, oh, we're going to cancel it this week. Oh, we're going to move it 15 minutes later next week. You can't. You have to run your business professionally. Issues. You asked about challenges, and I really want to be honest about this, because another challenge that I think it's important to speak to is a more personal, and that's my self-awareness and understanding my part in how the studio evolves and my relationships to my staff, to my teachers, to the yoga community, to other studio owners. And so I've been working a lot on that, but there's often times when I look back and think, wow, I wish I would have let go of that. I wish I would have empowered people to make decisions. You can't do it all yourself. And I found that probably the biggest flaw that studio owners have is, and it happens with small businesses, is they micromanage. They want to do everything themselves. They want to make all the decisions from, where this plan is sitting to who's on the teaching this time, or what guest teacher can come in, or what color paint's on the wall. And at that point, nobody's empowered and nobody feels that they're meaningful within the whole structure of your yoga business. And my husband's been really good about, like I said, he's mentoring me, and it's taken some time. It's taken about 7 years, and I finally am letting go and can't text your employees when you have a question. And there's certain things I had to learn professionally, but I'm willing to learn, and I think that's really important too. Are you willing to learn as a yoga teacher? Are you willing to learn as a studio owner? We don't come in knowing, and we don't know what we don't know.
Right. It seems like since the yoga industry is certainly growing, the Yoga Journal study and the Yoga Alliance study has shown it, I think, doubling in the last 4 years just in how many students are coming to yoga. And it seems like, did you feel like you had a real clear idea of what to do to run a studio? I mean, there's no how to run a studio for dummies book out, as far as I know. What resources did you look to, and did you just draw upon business experience, or were there other resources that you turned to help you?
Well, my husband has an MBA, he has a lot of experience in business, so I turned to him. But I really needed to balance that with, hey, hon, this is a yoga business. It's not a corporate or manufacturing plant, which he comes more from that corporate world. So there was one book that I read. It was So You Want to Own a Yoga Studio.
Oh, they did one.
But I read it after we had been in business a couple of years, and I thought, oh, good, I'm doing what they said.
Okay.
I think a lot of it was a combination of my passion for yoga, my husband's business sense, and starting off with some phenomenal teachers. We just had, I think about Donna and what she brought, Donna O'Neill. I have to say her name because she was there. She was there before I was there when we bought the studio, and she had already built this community. And so to use her as her example and to continue to do that, I knew I wanted it to be a community. I have things that I do at Eugene Yoga that I feel are really serving the community. We give a lot of yoga away. We have scholarships. We offer $6 drop-in classes. So I know that I'm doing my part to make yoga accessible to anyone and everyone. If I have to give it for free, I will. But I'm also going to make sure that my teachers get a paycheck and that we're going to have a place for them to teach yoga next week or next month. And that's really a tough balance. And sometimes I'm not sure yoga teachers always appreciate that the community always appreciates that. And I'm not trying to say, oh, poor me. But I do know that studio owners are really struggling. And they're struggling with how do you make it financially successful? How do you teach what you know is really safe and sustainable for people? How do you give people what they want versus what they need? I can't tell you how many times I walk into a private session with someone and they say, oh, I want to be able to hold plank longer. And I look at them and I think, you just need to be able to breathe.
Yeah.
Your diaphragm's stuck. It's not about plank. You don't need to muscle through a pose. You need to soften and relax. So you're always working that balance of what people want and what people need. And as my teacher, Scott Anderson, says, give them 80% of what they want, 20% of what they need. And I think that as the yoga profession's evolving, I know Diane Bruni and Matthew Remsky have a really great dialogue going on about what's happening in the yoga profession. We keep giving people what they think they want, and it's not what they need, and we're actually hurting them. You asked me earlier about what my favorite yoga book is, and one of them is The Science of Yoga, which is William Broad's book about how yoga can hurt you. And it's a very realistic book about what is truly proven that's effective, what we think might be helping, and what is really bad advice that we're giving, and bad cues and bad practices that are not helping our students. There's a lot of things we do in yoga that aren't really supporting people.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing because it seems like there's a very special relationship between a yoga student and a yoga teacher. And there's really almost an inexplicable amount of trust that goes into it. When you really look at what are the qualifications or the level of experience that teacher has gone through, and then you look at what kind of movements that people are going into, sometimes it is quite shocking to look at objectively. To get back to a little philosophy, I guess I'm always curious to hear, somebody with a lot more experience than I have to talk about this, because when I hear some of these discussions where they say, yoga's going in the wrong direction or this and that and the other, a lot of people will come in and they'll say, well, originally yoga is this surrender. You surrender to the guru. You do whatever they say, and it's a spiritual awakening. You can't understand it, and you can't overthink it, and you have to just let go. And it's a very much like a letting go of yourself. And then I see kind of the American interpretation where it's like, no, we need to be self-empowered, and there needs to be rules of consent and boundaries and all of these things. And it almost seems like there's this dualism, which I suppose is inherent, but I wonder if you have any input on that kind of discussion.
I really appreciate the work that Matthew Remsky's doing right now, and as well as Diane Bruni. And Matthew's in the process of writing a book called Walwadiya, What Are We Actually Doing in Yoga? And in that book, he talks about the space that we create in a yoga class and what we do as a teacher with that space. And the words, so we create this space, and their nervous system is really calmed, and then we start to put our words in their head. And we don't know their background. We don't know when we say to someone, now let's see if you can hold plank for 1 minute, if this person is an athlete who believes that no pain, no gain. We don't know if this person has a history of trauma. We don't know what we're saying and doing. And so I think that the words we choose as a yoga teacher need to be so careful. And we aren't a guru, and we're not. Most of us have very little anatomy training. When I think about my first teacher training, and the anatomy I got was, pretty minimal. We don't have a lot of business saying most of what we're saying or making the claims that we're making. I love what Diane Bruni's doing about calling herself a yoga educator and transitioning to being more of a movement educator, because I think that that's what's happened in contemporary yoga is there weren't a lot of postures, asanas, in the old yoga, and now we created all these postures, less than a couple hundred years ago, and some of them aren't that healthy. So let's take a step back and educate ourselves and understand, I love to understand what the biomechanics are, and then can I layer the biomechanics of what the body really was meant to do, and then the intricacies of the uniqueness, and can I layer that in with this beautiful yoga philosophy that says, do no harm and find some peace and contentment. The guru stuff I'm not really that familiar with. I know that was part of, how it was practiced a long time ago, a very long time ago. Wow. Well, I don't even know where to go with guru.
Yeah. Well, I think that's nice to hear that too. And I guess just looking at it from a 30,000 point view, back in the old days, there was a lot less people doing it. I think there was a lot of homogeny, right, in the group of people doing it. It was all, a certain age group, a certain gender, all affiliated. Maybe they couldn't travel. They all lived in the same area. They had the same religion. They had the same culture. So I wonder if just taking that and saying, oh, this is yoga, and now spreading it out to the whole world is part of the reason why there's this kind of conservative and liberal kind of, like anything, like religion, there's going to be these two sides saying the old way is better, the new way is better. Mm-hmm. But it's really interesting, and I'm also fascinated to see how things grow as more people from more backgrounds, and as we get more knowledge of trauma-informed teaching and working with people from all different backgrounds. It really requires us as yoga teachers to take in way more than just learning the names of the poses and even simple anatomy. It's really asking more of us. And I guess, what do you think is the solution for those who feel like they want to grow and they want to expand? What would be the best place to start, I suppose?
I like your question. A good place to start, if you really want to be the best yoga teacher possible that honors the body, that honors the mind, that honors the spirit, I think that's with your teacher training. I think that you have to really look at the integrity of the program and what the qualifications are of the person teaching the program. How long have they been teaching? What is the program robust? What are you actually going to learn? Is it going to make you show up? Too many people take a teacher training because they can get it over quickly, or they get to do it in a glamorous location. So I think that's one of the first things, is to look at the teacher training and to understand that those first 200 hours is like going through elementary school. You basically are just learning the fundamentals of reading, writing, and arithmetic. You're just learning the basics. But go out and teach, get some experience, and then go back and get some more training and make sure that that's also a robust training with integrity. So I do think that's how we're going to step up our game and raise the bar and have better yoga teachers. Unfortunately, a lot of studios, a lot of yoga teachers, that's where they get a lot of their income, is doing teacher trainings. And so they're just looking at, okay, I got to do a teacher training this year because that's what's going to keep my yoga studio afloat.
Right. Yeah. It's a really tricky dilemma. And, when I can totally see how that's happening. And what do you think is the solution? Because a lot of mom and pop yoga studios are going under. Corporate yoga is gaining power. Because of that group energy and that, ability to organize over larger groups. I'm sure that'll continue. Do you think the independent yoga studios will continue to grow? Is there going to be kind of a plateau, or what do you see as a sustainable model in a perfect world?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. What's a sustainable model for the yoga industry? So I think there's two directions we can go. We can go one direction where it becomes so corporatized, so business-like that you don't even have any little mom-and-pop yoga studios anymore. You have your Yoga Works, and then you have yoga within the gyms, which, you can pay $39.95 to get a swimming pool, a workout room, a cardio room, and a yoga space for your $40 a month, which that's why yoga teachers are getting paid less and less, because the gyms can't really afford to pay the teachers that well. Some of them are even just putting a video on.
And so as a final question for you, what would you say are the right expectations somebody should have if they think that their path is calling them to open a studio or to manage a studio?
If you think that you want to open a studio, I think you need to think about what you want out of that. If you're wanting to teach yoga, I wouldn't recommend opening a studio, because you're going to be spending most of your time doing the logistics, running the business piece of yoga. That's about a 60-hour-a-week job if you're doing it by yourself. So let's say you have a partner and you can split it up. So you're each doing 30 hours a week. So then you want to teach. Then you're really not going to have an income, because you're not going to make enough money to support two people in that yoga studio. So you better have a nice hefty savings or some kind of trust fund if that's your strategy. Running a yoga studio is a lot of dirty work. You step in at the last minute to teach, you mop floors, you take student complaints. You also have the joy of knowing that you're serving others. And that part you can't put a price tag on that. But you're going to work really, really hard. And I don't know a single studio owner that says, I'm making a really good living running a yoga studio. Most of them are barely making a minimum wage for the hours they put in. That's the reality of it. That's why they start doing teacher trainings. That's why they start leading retreats. That's why they start doing more privates. That's why they start augmenting their salary. You also asked me about where yoga is going, the industry of yoga. And I see there being two different tracks. One is the corporate track, where you're going to see more yoga in health clubs, more really big conglomerate yoga studios like Yoga Works, where you pay your $150 a month and you can take unlimited yoga because they're counting on lots of people not showing up, which then means that yoga's for the privileged, because not most people have $150 disposable income to spend on yoga classes, right? That's just not realistic for the person who works at Starbucks. So now then you're trying to serve the people that can't afford to do that. So that's why we have the other yoga studios. But there are two things that are missing when you start to distill it down to a business that's very corporate-like, is you start to miss out on that community and the intentional community. So intention plus community are the two things that are super important when you're talking about holding space to have a yoga class. And that's what the teacher brings. And so you come into the studio and everybody's got something going on, and the teacher says, it's okay, it's going to be okay. And you're breathing and moving together, and you start to create this community. And that's why it's really important that we have other activities that we do to offer our yoga students, or we have a picnic, or we have a workshop, or we have a skills day, something to build more community. And then that intention that people come in, that teachers are always talking about what's your intention, and I think that's a really nice gift that you're saying, here's some space, what's your intention? What do you need from your yoga practice today? So that's what I like to leave as a message, is community plus intention, and I don't know if you can get that in a sterile room in a gym.
Right, great. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate what you've created here at Eugene Yoga, and it's really an honor to teach here. And, it's really an amazing journey we're on, and yoga is growing right before our eyes. And it's really exciting to see where it's heading, and I really appreciate all the work that you're doing, breaking trail, and helping lead others along this path.
I appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
Namaste.
Namaste.